right, everybody. After a couple of weeks off, we are back with another weekly episode of Conversations with Commodores. And I've got one of my former teammates out of SoCal, Lewis Woolridge, is with us tonight. Lewis, good to see you, bud.
Good to see you too.
And if you guys didn't know Louis back in the day or don't know him now, he's one of those guys that you're just glad to call him friend. And as I said in the little promo, he had that cool, still has that cool California vibe, but you get him on the gridiron and he would have knocked your block off and smiled about it as he picked you back up. No finer compliment I can give as a competitor and such a great friend. So Lewis, I really appreciate you having some time for us tonight, and I'm looking forward to our days revisited. So thank you, bud.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, we, as we do we've been off for a few weeks, but we're back and we've got a bunch of folks lined up. And if you look in the promos or on our group discussion, you'll see who's coming up. But Lou, you're all the way from the left coast. How does a guy in the fall of '87 make his way about 2,000 miles east to Nashville, Tennessee? Why Vanderbilt? You had other options. You came from a loaded historical football program, very proud program. Why didn't you stay out west? What brought you to Vanderbilt?
Number one reason is I wasn't recruited by the typical schools that you wanted to. And if you're from California and you got decent grades, your number one school is probably Stanford. Stanford told me that I was too small. And we had a recruiting coordinator at our school. Back in the day, that was not the norm. We had a counselor, and because we had such a pipeline of athletes that came through our program and went to big name schools, he had relationships with a lot of the recruiters. And it was a normal thing to see like Switzer and Osborne, and, the SC coaches and UCLA coaches coming through because they were looking for guys. But Coach Brown was at Rice prior to coming to Vanderbilt. And I think one of the reasons why I got recruited by Vanderbilt is because he recruited a guy at our school named Courtney Hall. He went to Rice. He started as a freshman and went on to the Chargers and became a very successful football player. And it was that relationship where like our counselor would talk to us and say, hey, what are your grades? What are you interested in? Blah, blah, blah. And he would find schools to match you up with. He's like, oh, you got the good grades. Hey, there's Vanderbilt. Courtney went here to Rice. The same coaches went there. Because I'd never even heard of Vanderbilt prior to maybe 6 months before I took my trip.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that connection, how I got connected with the school in that fashion, led the way. So, like I said, the only really West Coast schools that recruited me were University of Pacific and Washington State came in late, but, no other schools in the West Coast recruited me.
Well, guys, if y'all want to do a deep dive on a historic football program, go look up Banning High School out of Carson. Is it Carson?
It's actually Wilmington, California. I grew up in Carson. Our rival high school was Carson.
Don't be mistaken. It's Banning High School, but there you will see some impressive statistics and accomplishments over the years. Well, Lewis, when you came to Nashville, had you ever been this far east? Had you ever been in this part of the country before?
No. The furthest east I would have gone was Houston. My dad's family's from Houston.
Did you even own anything more than a windbreaker or a sweatshirt at that point when you took your recruiting visit? Because I suspect you came in December or January when it was awfully cold and maybe even snowy in Nashville.
It did actually snow. And the funny thing about it is my two trips prior to going to Vanderbilt was Utah State and Colorado State.
Oh, okay.
So
you had cold. Okay.
I had to get some clothes for these trips.
Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing about Utah State, and it's kind of crazy when you think back to it, they actually took me skiing. You think back to it, it's like, how crazy was that?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. Well, who were your hosts when you came into Nashville, when you came to Vanderbilt for that weekend?
DeMar Winston was my host. I remember that trip very distinctly because he took me to a party over at on Peabody.
Uh-huh.
I forgot that main building where I had all the parties at. And we went there, and I had my championship jacket on, and it actually got stolen that night.
No.
Yes, it was stolen, and it was on Saturday night. I remember I was like, I ain't coming to school. I'm not coming to the school. I was pissed. And literally Sunday before I left, Damon had found the jacket. He ran over to the athletic department and he got it to me before I left.
Did he ever tell you where he found it?
I don't know if he actually found the person that actually took it, or somebody took it and dumped it somewhere and he found it somewhere in the building or something like that.
Wow. Well, I suspect nobody was going to confront Demond if he had the jacket or she had the jacket. It was going to get turned over. But frankly, is what you're telling us is basically Demond saved your recruitment to coming to Vanderbilt.
That, and then the fact of the matter was, like I said, I wanted to go to Stanford. And then I took my 2 trips to Utah State, Colorado State, and then ended up at Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 more trips after that. The next trip was going to go to Rice,
Mm-hmm.
and that last trip was University Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know Rice's reputation is the same as Vanderbilt's, similar to Stanford, all same category. And that guy Courtney that Watson and I believe Coach Shepard told me he recruited him to Rice, was going to be my host, and we were good friends at the time, and I was going to go there. So after I took my trip to Vanderbilt, then it was towards maybe the last 2 weeks left, and I recall getting calls from the school saying, "Hey, we only have so many spots left. They're starting to get filled up. Do you really want to wait out your 5 trips?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
So when I got back from Nashville, I think I committed the Tuesday or the Wednesday when I returned.
So what you're saying to us without saying to us is you had a pretty darn good time in Nashville that weekend. Lou, the statute of limitations is long expired, dude. Nobody's gonna
Well,
say.
so if you recall, I was not very
You weren't a big partier.
introverted.
Yeah, you weren't a
You
big.
know, yeah, I wasn't a big partier, and so it, it was all entertaining to me just to do all of those different things and have the opportunity to go to these schools and visit. That was like the biggest thing that's happened to me since going to high school.
Yeah, I'm sure. Guys, we've got a bunch of Commodores have rolled in. O.J. Fleming, Billy Smith, Tom Fitz, Kenny Cole. Thank you, fellas, for tuning in. I've got sweet Lou Woolridge out of SoCal. Now, when you were talking to some of those co-eds and some of the guys on the team on that recruiting visit, they knew you had the vibe, but you also didn't have that Southern drawl, that dialect. And you probably wanted to know what sweet tea was. Do you have any other recollections of that weekend that may be sold or made an impression on you?
The only thing I can recall was going to Ruth Chris
Oh, yeah.
and having, I've never been to a restaurant like that, and getting the steak, and then if I recall correctly, I got a wedge salad. I never knew what a wedge salad was. And when they brought it out, I'm like, oh, it's just a wedge of lettuce. So yeah, that was a experience.
So you committed, you signed, and you came on in the fall of '87. And you guys really had some serious talent that signed in your class. Cedric Moore, who one day, I promise you guys, I'm going to get on this show. I've been on him. He lives 15 minutes from me. I can't even get him to commit to lunch, but when I do, I'm going to get him on this show. Rod Keith. I mean, I could go on and on and on. On the defensive side, you guys had some awesome players who contributed a lot immediately. So let's go into that first fall. Lou, who was your roommate and what position were you competing for and things like that?
So when I played defensive line in high school. I was a defensive end, and then the plan was I got recruited as it was a rover at that time, that rover linebacker position. So I came in. My roommate at the time was I don't know if you remember JD, Jonathan Daniels.
I do, from St. Louis.
Actually was from Kansas City.
Oh, close enough.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much the same.
He was a great
he didn't last
athlete. I
very
remember
long.
that.
Say it again.
He was a great athlete. I remember that.
yeah, but he didn't last very long. He wasn't a very good student.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
recall,
oh yeah, there's that component that you got to deal with.
he would he would literally uh and I thought it was the craziest thing. He would take his Bible and everything. He would pray for grades, and it was like, that ain't gonna help you.
You need to add some other stuff to that prayer list, dude.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you had JD was your roommate. Who was ahead of you on the depth chart that fall, if you recall? Who are you fighting to compete with, or who were you, I guess?
I can't even recall that first year. I just know in the following years there was Scott Scott Brown. There was another Scott Penny,
Mm-hmm.
Billy Cunningham,
Yeah.
uh, and I know at the time Chris was that middle linebacker, and we had Scanlon at middle linebacker, and Bob Scanlon, and yeah, those are the names that come to my mind off the top of my head.
Well, Lou, talk about a little bit of the transition, even though you came from a historic program and in a very tough league out in California. It's not the SEC. Everybody is bigger, faster, stronger who you're playing with and against. But talk a little bit about the high school to college transition on and off the field. Had you ever been away from home for any periods of time? Was it tough being so far away? What was that like, that first semester coming in the fall of 87?
Uh, it was a kind of a shock to my system for a couple of different reasons. Uh, One, coming from the team that I was on, I don't know if you recall or not, that prior season, we were like ranked the number one team in the nation, and we lost our last game. And our senior class, we've had 6 guys go Division I, and we have 3 All-Americans.
Wow.
And so, for me, I thought I was the shit. I thought I could play and all this kind of stuff. And I look back retrospectively in terms of that, my ability to get recruited was a result of the school and the timing and the type of defense that we played. We were a gap control defense. Mm-hmm. So coming into Vanderbilt, switching into a linebacker, was a totally different position for me, playing in space, playing standing up, more responsibilities. It was tough. I got redshirted, but it was a challenge on the field.
I think that at least in today's environment, today's kids, obviously it's a whole nother generation beyond ours, where we live, for most of those kids live in an instant gratification world because of internet, because of phones, whatever their life experience has been up to this point. I think that the red shirt year is so vitally critical for so many of us. Of course, I had one as well. But, you come in as a freshman and you've signed on the dotted line. And as an athlete, to be successful, and I've talked about this in prior shows, you have to have an air of confidence about you. You have to have the courage to do what you do, and then the confidence looking back, knowing that you've accomplished those things. But a lot of that can take a hit when you get redshirted. And some athletes understand it and go through it and actually appreciate why they're going through it. I certainly did. I wasn't happy about it, but I had 7 quarterbacks ahead of me, and I wasn't, I wasn't in anybody's plans. But what was your initial response? And before you answer, I want to welcome Dino. John Denardi has joined us, one of our teammates back in the day. Lewis, what was your initial response? Do you remember having conversations with your family about this? Did you know you were going to be redshirted?
Well, I knew I was going to get redshirted for sure coming in. It was a lot of soul searching, right? Committed to it. You're coming into, on multiple levels, I was kind of kicked in the face, right? Yeah. On the field, in the classroom, and even socially, coming from California, going to the Southeast. I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and everybody would always ask me, is like, how'd you like Vanderbilt? You know, when I was there at the time. And I'm like, and I say, I don't like it here. I don't feel comfortable here. I don't, you know, it's like, what's wrong? What don't you like? It's like, I don't know. Uh, and it took me years to figure this out. And, you know, with all the stuff that's been happening socially in, you know, in the last couple of years, you know, I kind of look, you know, and I've learned a lot of stuff when I went to Vanderbilt. So I don't regret ever going to Vanderbilt because I learned a lot, but it was, uh, what's the word? Um, Identity. I couldn't find my identity
Mhm.
because, you know, even going out to Vanderbilt, people would see me and like, hey, you're not blonde, you're not white. What are you?
Well, in the South, it's rare to have that third category back then, you know?
So my tagline I tell everybody is when I went to Vanderbilt, there were three types of students. You're black, you're white, or an exchange student.
Wow.
And
Never thought of it like that, but yeah.
that's the way I saw it.
Yeah.
And I had I couldn't identify. I had you know, so I came from a Carson, California, where I live in the South Bay, you know, suburb of LA. And you can talk to people that visited me, or even look at my Facebook. It's very diverse out here.
Mhm.
When I was in high school, you know, this was before Polynesians even got into the colleges. Like, you had one or two. So matter of fact, my senior year, I played an all-star game. I played an all-star game with Junior Seau. That's before he even hit the scene.
Mhm.
Polynesians were, you know, just starting to
Mhm.
make a, you know, an impact.
Yeah.
And if you asked me what I identified with in high school, it would be as a Filipino or a Samoan Polynesian person.
Mhm.
So going out to Vanderbilt, I would go out to Frat Row, you know,
Mhm.
hang out with guys. And like, yeah, this is kind of cool, but this ain't really.
Yeah.
Or
Frankly, you were an alien to them,
yes,
you know, because everybody was my color,
exactly.
unless they were athletic, frankly.
And if you didn't know, or for people who don't know, my actual race is I'm Black and Korean.
Mhm.
So, you know, I go hang out with the black guys on the team or the black guys in school, and I'm like, I fit in a little bit better, but I'm still not.
Well, I was going to say, Lou, culturally, you didn't have much in common with anybody. Frankly,
No,
with your Korean background, your California background, your commonality, frankly, was your book smarts and football. I mean, that's why you were there.
right. So it's like when I was in high school, it was if I go to a party, like there could be Hispanic guys there,
Mhm.
Filipinos, Asians, Hawaiian. Like our starting lineup in high school, we had a quarterback who was Hawaiian, a running back that was Samoan. We had offensive linemen that were white, black, Hispanic. You name it, we had it. And if I wanted to hang out, I'd hang out. I wanted to hang out with you know, my nerdy friends because I was smart. I hang out with them, or I hang out with the athletes. It's like, you know, my core friends that I still hang out with today. One is white and Hispanic. One is Filipino Hispanic. One is Black and Portuguese. I had another friend that's full Black, Asian. You know, so I
Yeah.
couldn't just be myself. It's like, especially at Vanderbilt,
Mhm.
I've never experienced being the minority and talking to people from Alabama and from the South and
Yeah.
getting their feelings on how things are really different. I'm like, hey, I just want to hang out with you guys and do this and that. It's like, nah, you don't kind of fit in with us.
Well, you know, the way you were just describing your high school experience, remember the old Benetton's ads from the 80s with the rainbow of color of faces? That was probably more your experience than what you got to when you came to Vanderbilt. And for those of you not old enough to know, the Benetton's ads were selling clothing, I think either for children or women, and it had kids of all nationalities. It really was a trendsetter back then, but it's always stuck with me that it was probably the most diverse advertising I had ever seen, at least up to that point. But that sounds like it was much more your experience than ever anything you experienced in Tennessee at a Lily White at the time, Vanderbilt.
So yeah, so all of those challenges, it kind of like the first couple of years before I actually built the confidence to say, hey, this is who I am, this is who, and not worry about if I'm being accepted by whatever group.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really do, I had a small circle of people that I hung out with. I went home with Rod to Alabama for Thanksgiving that first freshman year.
How eye-opening was that Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it was just different. Just seeing Birmingham and Hueytown, like where is this Hueytown? And we actually went to Atlanta because we went to go visit his cousin. So it's just seeing all the South, but then I just never felt comfortable. And that's one of the things when I graduated from Vanderbilt, I'm like, I got to go back home. I can't stay here.
Well, Lou, let me ask you, you redshirt your freshman year, you get a little bit of footing from an academic standpoint, you get a little bit of footing from an athletic standpoint, you're learning the system, you're learning about college. It's a big transition year. But sophomore year, you start to play, you get on the field. Talk about that mentality, that you get some confidence because now you're contributing. Number 91 is in the huddle and he's making some plays, and you continued to do that as the seasons went on. Did that help with anything from a mindset on and off the field, the fact that you were playing so?
So what I think happened is it kind of slowly introduced me to this. And this is one of the things I always remember from that first year. And this is something I love Coach Shepard to death, but me and Brent used to do the meal kit on punt team. I don't know if you recall that. We literally sacrificed our bodies for that. But that was my introduction to getting onto the field, playing special teams, and then slowly matriculating into the defense.
Yeah.
But as I progressed into my junior year, like I did get more and more time. Then junior year, I started playing a little bit more. But then at the time of my junior year, that's when we started recruiting some guys that like, I'm going to start losing my spot because we had Alan Young, John DeWitt, Sean Quarles, all these guys that are coming in bigger, faster than me. And I'm like, I'm trying to keep my head above water to stay in the lineup.
Well, as a computer science and math guy, were you able to, and this may be a stretch, were you able to use that part of your brain to justify or to figure out what you needed to do athletically to keep contributing, to keep enjoying playing the sport? That's why you were there at the school, because you're on a football scholarship and you needed to obviously complete your degree at the same time. Did that part of the brain it contribute at all to the thought process?
I think both academically and on the field, I had to make a commitment to get better. So academically, started using more tutors. I know during that time frame, McGugan went through one of the first remodelings, and I know we got more tutoring on staff, and that's when we had the Hendricks room, we had the tutoring. So I started using tutors more and like trying to get my grades together. And at the same time, so it was towards my junior year, I had committed to staying over the summer. Never did that my first 2 years or 3 years there. I went home. I was like, I gotta go home. But then, going into my redshirt junior year, I stayed the summer for the first time. I was like, I need to get my classes together. Once I needed to raise my GPA, get some classes in, and then two, get
Lou, was that leading into Watson's last season, or had DiNardo taken over no, he was there your fifth season. So this is Watson's last year. This would have been the season or the fall of 90. So you stayed the summer of 90 on campus and took classes and worked out.
Yeah, summer of 90 and the summer of 91. And and then At the same time, I had a friend of mine who was in the Naval Academy. He ended up in Pensacola my last summer, and it was a good opportunity to visit him, so I stayed for the summer. But yeah, I had to, you know, commit myself to getting better because if I didn't, I was going to get kicked out of school and not play.
And your story is not uncommon. When you come to Vanderbilt, it can be a pressure cooker academically. It can be a pressure cooker athletically because you're in the SEC and you're playing against very good competition. You're competing with very good competition. And sometimes guys wash out. Sometimes they just don't. They look for a better option or what they think is greener pastures. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But you stuck it out. And your story is not that much unlike mine. It was tough. I didn't get to play much at all. I traveled for 3 years. I lettered for 1 year, but I knew it wasn't going pro in football. And you have to make that commitment. You're going to finish your degree, figure out what your big plan picture is, grad school or starting to work or whatever it is, and you make the best of it. And that sounds like what you did at the time. So here's this is leading me. You finished, and we're going to come back to your senior football season. But once you finished the fall of 90, no, the fall of 91.
My senior year, my last year?
Yeah, your last year would have been 91.
Yes.
So you played 2 seasons for DiNardo.
No, just one.
Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Watson's last year was 90. So you
Correct.
finished that final season of 91. I assume we were still playing Tennessee and had not converted over to, I think we played Wake Forest for several years at the end. But wasn't Tennessee in 91 would have been your last game?
It was.
So that would have been at Neyland Stadium because in 89, that was my final game. Do you remember? I remember walking off the field at the end of that Tennessee game my senior year. Do you have any recollections of that last game, of your final collegiate game, knowing that now you finished as an organized athlete? You're retired at age 22.
So it was both good and bad for me. Meaning, I remember that last game because I remember something happened while we were doing pregame warmups and we were coming off the field. And I want to say something, somebody said something racially, and I don't recall what it was or not. But I recall, I think it was Jappy and Coach Jackson, I believe, or somebody was rushing up into the stands or something. And we were going into the locker room after warmups, and somebody threw over the table with all the Gatorade and all. And we were just pissed, right? Because of what's going on. I can't remember what's going on. But I remember going through that game and we lost that game and I cried because it was just like, it's one of those things where you learn that life is not fair. It's like we work just as hard as anybody else in this conference and we can't beat this team.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very frustrating. But at the same time, I knew I wasn't going to the pros. And for me, I had to work very hard just to be good. Where some people, it comes so naturally that they take it for granted and they're lazy and can still be good. I had to work very hard because, like my senior year, I converted to nose guard. I had to bust my ass. It just happened, but I had to. That was the hardest I ever worked to get on the field. So uh, it was sad to have that end, but I knew it wasn't going on. So me quitting football, I never touched the field. And it's like when people say, "Hey, let's go play flag football. Let's go play tackle football, touch football." I'm like, no, I'm done with football. It was too much of it was a job. I wasn't having fun anymore playing.
For about 10 years after I graduated, I didn't go to a game. I didn't care about watching it, got it out of my system. But I want to take you to that 91 season. You guys ended up 5-6. You beat, or you barely lose to LSU, Duke, and Auburn. And then you run off 4 straight wins. You beat Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Army, at Kentucky at home. Yep. And then you guys laid a goose egg at Neyland. Yep. Big loss. A 6-win season might have put you guys in a bowl game back then.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm sure leading up to that game, there was a lot of pressure on that, trying to get to a bowl game and yep. things like that. What about the mindset I'm finished as an organized athlete. Was there relief? Was there some sadness? Was it kind of bittersweet? Do you remember any of that?
It was definitely bittersweet, but it was definitely relief too at the same time. So I, after that game, a buddy of mine, my friend who was in high school, he actually came to Knoxville for the game, and I actually rode home with him back to Nashville, not with the team. So one of those things is like this chapter is closed,
Mhm.
and that spring semester, it's like I pulled a Matt Liner. So when Matt Liner was at SC, his last year there, he was taking like ballet or something, right?
Right.
I had like two classes that spring semester, no football practice. I remember, so we all coming from the towers during the fall. We had to do that walk of shame when the students were coming back on the campus, and you had that walk of shame through front row, and they're all just having a great time. No, no cares, drinking beer, hanging out on the lawns, and we're walking over to the Dudley, to the
Yeah.
field house to practice every day, and this was like that. So that last semester, I had an opportunity to just be a student. And I tell people today, I'm like, if you don't have to work, if you don't have to play sports, and you just have to go to school, there's no reason why you can't pass college.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I
So that last semester, I enjoyed myself. You know, Spring break coincided with Mardi Gras. So that's when the rec center was just open. And it's funny, me and Rod would go to the rec center, and we were doing personal training, and we were charging like $5 a session, raising money so we could go to spring break.
that's so awesome. $5 a session. That's so great.
Back then that was like good money.
That was found money right there. That's so
Yeah,
great.
so so I enjoyed my last semester only, because at that time I was either getting kicked out of Vanderbilt or I was going to graduate.
Mhm.
And, so I was already, so it was just challenging, but it was relaxing, and I finished out semester. So it was something that I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that last semester when you're no longer having football obligations and you can just be a regular Joe College, there's a lot to be said. You're almost like you're let out of a mental and physical cage.
Yeah.
Go into the lake, go into just road trips,
Yep.
but don't tell Coach Shepard about any of those things because he's going to end up watching this. You know he is. But guys, I'm talking with Lewis Woolridge from Carson, California, and he and I were teammates for 3 years, 87, 8, and 9 in school together for almost 4 years. And we're just running through some growth time because that's what college really is about for many of us. Physical, spiritual, emotional. And for Lou, I don't know how far, maybe it's close to 2,000 miles from Nashville to your hometown. That's a long trip. It's still a long trip. Did you ever drive it or did you always fly it or how did you get back and forth?
Always flew until those last 2 years where I didn't go home for this. Well, I actually did go home for that one Maymester,
Mhm.
uh, but I never drove it. But yeah, I remember at the time Northwest had this special where I believe if you were a college student, you get 2 free round trips. And
No wonder they're not in business anymore.
I remember giving one of those vouchers to Rod so he can come out to California.
Yeah.
So
Now there's a conversation when I get Rod on the show about Rod's experiences in California.
yeah,
Uh,
those are another story to be told.
I know there's lots of good stories there. Lou, when you weren't doing football, when you weren't figuring out math equations, were there places in town on campus or nearby that you and Rod and some of the guys used to go to hang out or get a burger or anything memorable?
So,
Don't you
like I
dare
said,
say
I was
Mr.
very,
Gaddy's
very
pizza.
introverted.
Did you hear me? Don't you dare say Mr. Gaddy's pizza on Sunday nights because that was disgusting.
Like I said, I had a hard time adjusting socially to the environment event.
Yeah.
And the only places I would hang out would be if there was a party in the towers, and I would just hang out on the floors, or the guys were playing cards in the main room, or going down the frat row and just being silly. But I I didn't actually start drinking until after I graduated from college. I did not like beer, so
Mhm.
there wasn't that factor to play with. So it was my social interactions were very limited, and I wasn't into the frat scene, and so I was a lot. I was very not very excited.
Well, let's talk about post graduation. You go, you walk, you I assume that was it Chancellor Wyatt? Was he still there your year? You graduate in May of 91 and
92.
or I don't know why I keep saying that. 92. Did you know what you wanted to do? Did you have a plan at that point? Or were you just happy to have that paper and it was time to come home?
I was happy to have the paper because that was the biggest accomplishment in my life at that point, in the stage of my life. I had been interviewing, I was putting pressure on us like I'm about to graduate. And the fact, back then, where Vanderbilt is not as doing, they're doing great things right now in terms of getting kids prepared for graduation. But at that time, I didn't have an internship. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any kind of work experience coming out. I would try to do the campus interviews with a couple of different companies. I remember I interviewed with Microsoft before they even blew up. This was right before they blew up.
Mhm.
And I blew that interview. And so I had no job. I remember I got a call from an arena football team in Chicago. I'm like, I'm done with football. So I never returned those calls.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. Um, so no job. And like I said, I had a friend in flight school that went to the Naval Academy, lived down in Pensacola.
Mhm.
I told him, I'm like, dude, I'm coming down there and I'm going to be your maid. I lived with him for about a week, had some graduation money, hang out in Pensacola before I went home. I got home and didn't have a job, still had my graduation money. I'm like, I got to find a job. I got to do something. So I started looking. My first job out of college, I was working at a department store in ladies' handbags and shoes. That was the stuff.
Nice.
I worked there that first 6 months until Christmas. And that was the most depressing Christmas ever.
Yeah.
Because I had worked there, I've been applying for jobs, and you hear this Christmas music every single day, the same Christmas music. And I'm
And
like,
were you living in your family home?
still living with my family.
Were you back in your childhood bedroom?
Yep.
Nice.
And it was depressing. I was like, I almost went into teaching because in California, if you have your degree, you can take the essential skills test. If you pass that with your degree, you can substitute teach. So I was going to do that. But literally the second week of December, a job came through. And I actually started a job in January 91, which was related to the field that I was working with in terms of computers and stuff.
Mhm.
So from there, uh, stepping stones to all my different jobs that I had from there, and just got better.
And share with us a little bit about your profession now. What line of work are you in?
So for the last 20 years, 19 or actually 2001 or so, well, I was actually doing consulting and I was doing client server development. Um, and then I the consulting company that I went with was working for went under, and I did independent consulting for about a year or two. But a guy that I met at that original consulting company started his own consulting company. And at that time, there's a new company that came out, Salesforce. You may or may not have heard of it. But Salesforce started in 2001, and it was customer relationship management. My friend who I worked with at the previous company, that's his area of expertise was CRM. She said, I'm starting this consulting company and I'm building it on, we're going to use Salesforce. Salesforce, never heard of it. So yeah, there's this hosted application platform where you put all your data, you didn't call it the cloud back then, but you put all your data in this location offsite and you go through a browser to run your application to use your data. I'm like, all right, I'll try it. I had no idea. But that transition and working with Salesforce like saved my career because I'm able to became a developer and an admin on that platform. And that platform is kind of constrained. It can do a lot of things now, it's grown a lot, but it's constrained where you can only do so much on it. But I've been doing that for the last 20 years. Now I am a system administrator for a wealth management company that uses Salesforce. So I'm an internal resource to manage that platform.
You're actually one of those people who's using his degree to a certain degree many years later in his profession. You're one of those rare guys. Well, Lou, we've got a little bit of time left. I want you to brag a little bit about your beautiful family. I love seeing the photos that you post, whether you're at the dreaded Dodger games or just having fun in SoCal. But talk a little bit about your family.
So my wife, it's kind of interesting story, and I won't go into too much detail, but we knew each other in high school, and she actually dated and married one of my best friends. They did not work out. They had 4 kids, but we've always been really good friends. When we were in high school, everybody thought that she was my girlfriend because my friend at the time wasn't at our high school. He went to another school, but we would always hang out and everybody. So we always gotten along. So 10 years later, we ended up getting together and we got married in 2002. It's our 20-year anniversary coming up.
Wow. So wait, 0102 is a good time period for you. You started your new profession, new job, and you tie the knot with the love of your life.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a transition period. It was a lot of things from the 90s being young and doing all those different things because I was 30, it's right around when I was about 32. So once you move in your 30s, life starts changing, right?
That's right. That's right.
But from their previous marriage, they had 4 kids, so I had an immediate family. So today I have 6 kids. My 4 older stepkids, they're all in their 30s now.
Right.
But I have a son who is 19. He actually unfortunately graduated in the middle of COVID. So his whole senior year just got demolished.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for him because I have so many great memories of my high school and my senior year and all this stuff. And he had none of that. He just got taken away from him. But, I've been working with them. He thought he wanted a job, doing auto mechanics. He actually found one, but that job kind of changed his mentality. He's realizing that's really hard work. So he enrolled into community college this semester. So he's doing that. And then my daughter she just turned 16.
The caboose. The caboose.
Yeah, so she's a sophomore in high school and she's playing basketball and keeps me busy. She's actually in track.
Is she at Banning?
No, so she's at another right. It's weird.
Too much pressure for her to be an athlete at Banning. We know you're just being modest.
I will say this: city section football in Los Angeles is not the same in California in general. So I don't know about other states, but you guys all know the big schools in California, Bosco and Mater Dei.
Yeah,
everybody knows those schools, and the way they recruit as a private school, they bypass the rules, so they are literally mini colleges. So yeah. So city section public football, Banning, Carson, that's rec league here now. So it's totally changed.
At least you have a high school. Mine folded into our rival. We no longer have a high school.
Wow.
So at least you have one. Well, Lou, let's conclude with this because I sure appreciate you sharing your journey with us, because college, regardless if you play a sport or you're in the band or you go because you're a chemist, whiz, whatever got you to college, there's always a growth, a transition period, because you're going from being a 17, 18, 19-year-old to a 21, 22, 23-year-old by the time you get out. But you go through all of this growth, and you shared a lot of that with us tonight. And you with 6 kids under your tutelage, have you been able to share any of your journey either with them or other people, maybe some of your employees who you supervised, what did you learn about your Vanderbilt days that maybe have helped you, that maybe you've also shared to show with others?
One is adversity. You got to learn how to handle adversity. Like I had adversity at Vanderbilt, on the field, off the field, in the classroom, and I had to overcome it. I'm grateful that I didn't play in today's environment where they have this transfer portal and all that, because I would have been a dumbass and shit. I'm going to transfer out of here and end
You've
up
been
nowhere.
gone.
No, I would have been back home because, the fact of the matter is, I wouldn't have thrived in this environment today because everything is so individually focused in terms of talent. You got to be a great passer. You got to be this or that. I was lucky. So, the thing that I learned, to kind of go back to that, is everybody has a role.
Mhm.
I learned that in high school. Our defense, like I said, was gap control. Your role is to maintain this gap. And it allowed me to get to college. And that's where I struggled my first couple of years, because as a linebacker, it's like we didn't have, I had to read defense, what's going on, where am I dropping to, do all that stuff. And I struggled with that. And it wasn't until that senior year. So when I came in that summer of 91, I stayed. And, granted, Coach Gates was a great coach, and I respect the hell out of him. I didn't develop very well in his system. It wasn't until we switched over to more powerlifting kind of thing. It was like, okay, I got strong. So that summer was the best shape I ever been in. The strongest. Some people can recall that. I actually benched 405. I never even, so at that time I was like one of the stronger guys on the team. So that summer when we reported in, we had a couple guys get injured on the defensive line. And I recall this was before we went to belt buckle.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
we
good
didn't even
stuff.
talk about that, but
Yeah, and you know, Coach Donardo taught me, he's like, hey, a couple of our defensive linemen went down, and I think he had heard that I benched 405. He's like, we want to try you out at nose guard. He's like, we're going to try this system with you, and if it doesn't work, you can always go back. But we want you to play nose guard. And because I was falling behind on the depth chart of the linebacker. I was like, so I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, I want to do this. It turns out it was the best decision I could have made, because I was in a system where I was literally, I was hopping into the gap. So I was doing gap control again.
Mhm.
And my responsibilities shrunk down, but I played a role. And I always tell the story, me and Rod used to bet on number of tackles. And I remember going to Syracuse, our very first game, and I was playing against some All-American center that was like 6'6", and I was coming up to the shoulder, and he was ragdolling me. I'm like, did I make the right decision to do this? But every game I was losing my money, and it took me a little time to figure out my responsibility wasn't to make tackles or make plays. My
Yeah.
responsibilities was to occupy space
Mhm.
and take on the blockers so Rod could make all the tackles and all the linebackers could
Yeah,
move.
you weren't going into that bet with full knowledge of your position yet.
Full understanding. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that whole experience taught me is like we all have a role. And I use that in my job today. It's like we all have a role. You're not going to be the superstar. You're not going to be the leader. Like I'm an admin now. I had no problems going from being a developer to being an admin in the role that I am, because in the bigger scheme of the team, I fulfill the role so
Mhm.
that the whole team succeeds. Our defense that senior year, we should have went to a bowl game. Those 3 games that we lost, we could have won. We could have been 8-3 easily.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what could have been?
Yeah.
We could have been that team. But everybody had a responsibility. I learned how to take that responsibility. It wasn't about being a linebacker and making plays. It was about, hey, do this, take care of this, and the team will succeed.
You know, it's so awesome that you recognize that, because not a lot of athletes who are used to being the stars on their high school teams can fill that role physically or mentally. I'm the alpha. I'm coming in, I'm making all the tackles, I'm throwing all the passes, I'm running the ball all the time. But every good team, whether it's on the gridiron or in the boardroom or back in the production office, wherever it is, every team that's good, that works together, has players who fulfill roles. And
Yeah.
Lou, I bet, and I know how humble you are, but I bet you're fantastic at your job being an admin for a team that really looks up to what you need for them to do. I have no doubt, and I've never met a single one of them, but knowing you and how much of a teammate you have always been, I know that that's right. I do. Lou is the type of teammate we all want on our team, guys. And I'm not just saying that because he's here with us tonight sharing his story. I would have told that even with Rod Keith sitting as my guest. Lou, I want to thank you, bud, for taking us on your journey. What an insightful 45 minutes that we've had. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Enjoyed, reminiscing about challenging but good times.
Yeah, they are challenging, and we learn from them all. So guys, I know we took a couple of weeks off. We've got a bunch of guests lined up, Commodores from different eras.
Brother next week, right?
No, we've rescheduled
Okay.
Kevin for June. His schedule is just kind of crazy, but he and I've been in contact, and I think it's like June 7th is the date. I'm really looking forward to catching up with Kevin. We have Dr. Ann Neely coming up. We have Pat Akos and some others. So just check back, please. James Threlkill, artist, he has a phenomenal story from the 70s, one of the pioneers. Also, before we get out of here, Lou, I want to mention a couple things. This weekend is a huge baseball series against Tennessee. Tennessee's #1 team in the country. We got a bunch of former players coming to the games. Hope to see you guys there. I'll be at the Friday and Saturday night games. Spring game is coming up April 16th. If you're going to come to the game or going to come to practices, let Chris Griffin with the Black and Gold Club know, because Coach wants to know who's going to be there. They'll get you name tags. Coach will be prepared to meet you guys at practice. It's very important to him. It's very important to the program that we have that continuity. Again, the Black and Gold Club is really doing a fantastic job of taking all of our current athletes, regardless of sport, and they're trying to pair them up for summer internships or potential employment opportunities. So if you haven't gotten into there, get into the Black and Gold Club. They have an online directory. It's very easy to enter your stuff, and let them know if you've got positions available or if you want to hire, or at least for internships, Vanderbilt athletes. So Lou, again, thank you, bud, for spending some time with us tonight. It's been my pleasure seeing you and catching up. And guys, keep coming back tonight is Thursday, but every Tuesday night. And we'll see you next time. You guys anchor down.
Yes, anchor down, everybody.